this episode, we travel to Northern Ireland, the riot capital of Britain, where, despite the peace agreement, anger continues to explode in the streets with alarming regularity.
It is no way normal or healthy to know how to make a petrol bomb when you're 6.
The rioting is about having crack.
This is the Springfield Road area of Belfast. On my left is where the Protestants live, and over the wall on my right is where the Catholics live. Now, the peace process has made huge steps in allowing these communities to live together without the fear of death by extreme violence. But what's also clear is there still remains huge religious and physical divisions between the communities. Because this is a city which for the last 30 years has played host to some of the most violent and dangerous riots in British history.
Last summer, Northern Ireland was rocked by some of the worst rioting in over a decade. There were major skirmishes in July and August, but the worst occurred in Belfast in September. Journalist Simon Hunter, a Belfast resident, took me down to where it started.
Was it an incident that sparked the riots, or was it, fuck it, let's just have a riot, or...?
It was the White Rock Parade, which is an Orange Order parade in North Belfast. Was rerouted throughout the summer.
The Protestant Orange Order had wanted to march through the mainly Catholic Springfield Road area, but the authorities insisted this was hostile and provocative and forced them to change their route.
The Orange men protested, bit of a standoff between them and the police. It got out of order, things swelled up, and then when it kicks off, it kicks off.
After 3 days of standoffs, on Saturday, September the 11th, all hell broke loose.
It began yesterday with a bitterly contested Orange Order march banned from a Catholic section of the city. It descended rapidly into stone throwing, shooting and blast bombs.
As day turned to night, buildings were torched and cars were hijacked.
You can still see some scorch marks on the road where they've hijacked a car.
All this
Yes,
new
it's
concrete,
been
the
relayed.
new tarmac?
Yeah, and it's further on down. They would hijack a car, set a light to across the road, creating a roadblock. That brings out the police.
So is this street in the midst of that riot in a no-go area?
Oh yes, I was working nights that week, and I would come home this way sometimes. I couldn't drive this way.
Yeah, because it's just...
You couldn't, there was just hundreds of people on the street and police everywhere.
As the violence spread like wildfire across the city, police came under attack from gunmen hidden amongst the crowds.
You've got the people who are rioting, but then you've got the people who slip in behind the rioters who are armed.
Okay.
In Belfast, that's always been the issue, you know, both on the nationalist and unionist side, there's the terrorist organisations who are armed. People can die. I mean, these are well-armed military machines, if you will, who masquerade in with the rioters.
The riot went on for 3 days, with property damaged all across the province. Some rioters took the opportunity to help themselves to a cash machine with a stolen mechanical digger.
The Chief Constable, Sir Hugh Ord, described his force's performance on Saturday as world-class policing. It wasn't. It was third-class policing.
Police officers and soldiers came under a sustained, violent attack.
Not violence. They may have protected themselves, but there certainly wasn't violence. Well, if a policeman comes at you with a baton, you're going to put up your arm or something to stop it, aren't you?
The September 2005 riots were fed by a bitter resentment in the loyalist community that the peace process had favoured the Catholics.
All the politicians argued that it was a long burning feeling with unionists, working class, good, honest Protestant people who had felt shafted somewhat over the years by different things, by parts of the Good Friday Agreement, by certain IRA policies, by decommissioning, by the Northern Bank robbery. This is sort of basically a sign of how discontent Unionists and Loyalists are. If you see all the things on the left they feel have been given to Republicans and Nationalists. There's the Northern Bank robbery mentioned. The Sean Kelly thing was a huge issue. That was the Shankill bomber. He got released quite recently.
The other side have fought their way through and got well, basically justice of what they're getting. So why can't we do it?
So you think violence will get the results that you want?
Yeah.
One of the most shocking things about the riots in Northern Ireland is how young the people involved in them are. It seems that it's often teenagers or even pre-teenagers who are at the front of the violence. When I met Protestant kids in East Belfast, I was taken aback by how blasé they were about the whole thing. When you actually were in the riots, what were you throwing and how long were you at it? And
we're throwing bricks and bottles and stones and everything.
But how close do you get to the police to be able
close as you can get.
Because they just leave you alone?
Well, as close as you can get until like start driving over you, like start driving at you, you know.
What starts them?
Takes.
Just don't like them, they don't like us.
The police would do more for Takes than they would for Protestants. They're more on their side.
And is that a good enough excuse to riot about?
Yeah.
And what about recently? What's the most recent riots you've experienced?
About a month ago. On the Albert Bridge Road.
Yeah, and that was quite severe, wasn't it?
It was a good laugh. So it was.
What are you feeling when it's all happening? Is it just exciting or?
It's a good laugh, it gets you pumping.
It's just a laugh, it's a way of life.
Because it happens every year, the bands just want to walk and then the Emmons don't let them walk, so the Emmons just start a riot. So it's probably happen next year as well. Hope it does, like. And the year after.
Is it the highlight of the year?
Oh, it's brilliant.
The kids' attitude to street violence is shocking, not really surprising. Imagine growing up in a place where rioting is part of the social fabric. It happens so often that it's not only annual, it's almost a monthly occurrence. I'd imagine it's like terrifying yet also exhilarating. There are some academics that believe that rioting is so commonplace in Belfast now that it's actually a recreation pursuit, something born out of boredom and bravado rather than just political anguish.
And although a lot of the rioting is really linked to wider political and sectarian tensions, in some areas the rioting really takes much more of a recreational form. It's young people bored, not really knowing anything else to do. They pick on the other side, throw stones come back, rioting escalates. A lot of that takes place during the summer, when the evenings get longer, nights get lighter. Kids hang out on the streets, and over the last few years it's been a fairly recurrent problem.
Although the kids frequently join in the violence that accompanies the annual parades, they're also often at the centre of the riots that break out at the boundaries of the two communities.
Some things just start to rumble over the summer months. Kids hang around on the street corners. They hang around in places where the adult population is not going to control them very easily. So they gravitate to the boundaries with the other community, and that's where the trouble starts. And it often starts with exchanges of abuse, and then a few missiles going, and then it can readily escalate.
For the kids in these riots, it's about fun, not politics.
There's no political agenda behind a lot of the violence. They don't take it particularly seriously. They don't care for the consequences of it. The rioting is about having crack.
After the break, Gerry Adams tries to stop a riot. Irish kids throw bottles at beer-drinking squaddies, and one man takes on the riot police single-handed. Coming up, kids make petrol bombs, and Gerry Adams gets it in the face from a water cannon.
The policing methods were too heavy-handed.
The history of Ireland is scarred by the bloody violence that has occurred between the nationalist Catholics who want a united Ireland and the Protestant Unionists who would like to remain part of the United Kingdom. In 1921, the country was divided between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Now this solved some of the tensions, but it also created other problems. In 1969, this tension exploded in a riot here on the streets of Londonderry in what has become known as the Battle of the Bogside.
The catalyst for this riot was the Apprentice Boys' March, which celebrates a 17th century victory by the Protestants over the Catholics.
The Bogside is a traditionally Catholic nationalist part of Derry, and it's overlooked by the city walls. And up here, there's also the traditional parade route. In 1969, when the Apprentice Boys marched by the city walls, they were jeering and provoking the Catholic community below. And fairly soon, this erupted into a violent riot.
The rioting lasted for 3 days. Catholic Nuala McLaughlin was 6 at the time and remembers it well.
Everybody was involved in it at some level, from children my age, and our job was to go around picking up bottles. It sort of formed like a production line. The older ones would, do the petrol bit and the sugar bit. The old woman would carry them down to the front line. And it was basically a very community thing, and it was quite exciting.
Behind me is a mural painted by local Catholic artists immortalising the riots. The battle was to have a profound impact on Northern Irish politics. After 2 days of extreme violence, the Northern Ireland Prime Minister, James Chichester Clark, called his British counterpart, Harold Wilson, and asked him to send British troops to restore order to the region.
We were an oppressed people, or we certainly felt oppressed, and we were quite grateful when the British sent the troops in, initially.
Thank you very much.
I don't know entirely what happened, but within about a year, I think it became very evident that there was a British presence on our soil. And that's when the IRA started to gather, as far as I'm aware, momentum of, you came in as a peacekeeping force, you've done your bit. Possibly quite like Iraq now. Now can you go home? And of course, they weren't going home.
This antagonism came to a head in January 1972 on what has gone down in history as Bloody Sunday. Bloody Sunday started out as a demonstration, turned into a riot, and ended up as a massacre. The day began with a civil rights march by the Catholics. What happened next is still a matter of fierce dispute, but what is known is that by the end of the day, 13 people had been shot dead by British paratroopers. Bloody Sunday began a decade of violence in which the riot became the standard form of protest.
Now, on Saturday afternoons in the mainland, many people spent their time watching the films at the cinema, whereas here they spent it rioting. And that's why this mural is known as the Saturday matinee.
Yeah, it seemed to mostly be on a Saturday. I don't know if that's because people weren't working and they needed something to do on Saturday. All the youths from the Bogside would walk down William Street, and you'd see at the end of William Street the army already sat there with their glass shields, as if this is what we do on Saturdays. They were already there. There's funny things about, they didn't riot when it was raining. I don't remember any riots when it was raining. And I do remember they always dispersed about 6 o'clock as if it was tea time. So it was almost like this is what they did. They rioted in the afternoon, they went home for their tea, because their ma was making homemade soup or something, and then, they came back out again in the evening. That's hardly commitment to the cause. But then I don't think a lot of the rioters were with the cause. I think they just needed something to do. Obviously, some of them were with the cause, but not to the extent of being members of the IRA. As my sister would go to the riots because she fancied a bloke there. My other sister would go to the riots because if they got really bad, the army released the water guns, which was a great laugh. So, that's what I mean. There was always a comedy element.
A group of derelict houses was set on fire, and troops protecting an army fire tender were attacked with a hail of bottles from a brewery. A dog of mixed ancestry seemed unmoved by the danger. And even the troops took a breather as the attack went on. But it was not to last, and the bottles kept coming for a couple of hours.
It might have been a good laugh for the kids, but it meant a whole generation of children grew up thinking riots and petrol bombs were normal behaviour.
It is no way normal or healthy to know how to make a petrol bomb when you're 6. To have a rubber bullet as a trophy on your mantelpiece at the age of 7. This is not normal behaviour. Absolutely not, no. I grew up in violence. I have no memory of a life without it until I left Ireland.
Here, use a bottom of, Hold on, guys. Bottom. Good lad.
By the 80s, rioting in the province was in decline, replaced by something closer to a guerrilla war. But by the 90s, the politicians were finally making progress. In 1998, the Good Friday Agreement was finally signed.
This is a time for peace. This is a time for justice. This is a time for rebuilding.
And there is at least some hope today that the future will indeed be such as to banish the ghastly and futile violence from Northern Ireland.
The paramilitaries may have laid down most of their arms, but both sides continued to pick up stones, petrol bombs, and even brooms when the deep-rooted hatred between them erupts. In 2000, loyalists ran riot against the RUC in Drumcree, Belfast, in the run-up to an Orange Order parade. And in 2001, an Orange Order parade was again the cause of a riot, this time in the Ardoyne. The next year, rioting broke out when Protestants objected to Catholic kids walking through their area on the way to the Holy Cross School.
What started with a group of young school children going to school has revealed the depths of the divisions of hatred which still polarize society here.
It seems that the animosity between the two sides is as strong as ever. And here, even wearing the wrong football shirt can kick off a riot, as I learned when I chatted to some Catholics.
You know, the simplest wee thing, if somebody passes and they're wearing a Rangers top or a Celtic top, and somebody shouts at them, the next thing you know, there's people coming from everywhere to start a riot, and people's cars are being burnt or their homes are being burnt and attacked, and they don't need a big reason to start a riot.
There's this report that's been written that says that young people in Belfast now choose to riot as recreation rather than out of anger or out of provocation. Does that sound right to you or not?
I'd say we're just not doing it for recreation, and it's not for just fun purposes.
Yeah.
It's because, like, we've been growing up through this and we've lived with it all our lives because we've lived here and we've been in the front line.
The kids around here and the young people, if they see their homes or their families' homes being attacked by loyalist paramilitaries, the first thing they react to is to go up there and protect their homes. You know, and it's everybody, it's not just young men, it's young women, young girls and boys, like 12 and 13-year-olds are standing, throwing bricks and throwing stones, because all they've seen all their lives is people destroying things that belong to them and their community.
It seems a new generation of kids are carrying on Northern Ireland's long tradition of rioting. Political leaders may want peace, but many of the youth don't. Take July 2005, when Catholic teenagers rioted in the Ardoyne district of Belfast.
There was a Loyal Order parade coming up past a Catholic area. And as the parade started to go through past the Catholic area, the kids just let leash with a whole range of bottles, bricks, petrol bombs, or stones, and a barrage of missiles on the people marching up. And a lot of people were really quite badly injured and hit. A lot of people were really terrified.
Leaders of the nationalist community, including Gerry Adams, stepped in to try and halt the violence, but the kids were having none of it.
People on the Catholic side were trying to stop the kids, but one of the problems with either encouraging children or young people to involve themselves in rioting over a period of years, or not stopping them and getting engaged in it, is that sometimes they take the agenda, set the agenda themselves. And that's very much what they did this summer. You had Gerry Adams down on the streets trying to stop the disorder, and the kids were basically saying to him, "We ain't listening to you anymore. We're going to have the riot anyway." Basically sticking the fingers up to them.
So, while the politicians are putting the past behind them, for the kids it's not so simple.
This is hatred, and it's drummed into children. From no age, they're taught to hate the people from the other side of the peace wall, the jokingly called peace wall. Just people who live a quarter of a mile away, they're brought up to hate them, to despise them, because they're slightly different. Not only slightly different, it's racism, it's sectarianism, it's bigotry. But kids don't know any better, and they grow up with it, and then they hand it on.
That's what fuels the violent conflict and the riots.
That's what fuels it, that's what starts the contention, that's what starts the face-offs. It's the old don't back down, it's the playground logic, you know?
Okay.
It's just hatred is drummed into children.
So it's local rivalry, but with petrol bombs.
Local rivalry, but better kit.
Most riots need a long build-up of tension, a police presence, and perhaps a demonstration or a flash of anger to kick them off. But here in Belfast, there's already a historical hatred and an instant enemy to fuel the riots, and that's why they build these big peace walls to keep the communities apart.
And these walls won't be coming down anytime soon, because whatever the politicians might hope, it seems a whole new generation has already been raised to riot. Next time on I Predict a Riot, there's uproar in the north of England with some of the worst rioting ever seen on the British mainland.